Good morning. I hope you saw the pathetic report of the 92-year-old man who had to be moved out of a scabies-ridden rest home in Vancouver last week, and heard and saw some of the troubles in that particular establishment. This morning I'm going to go a considerable step further. Not for me to cause alarm and despondency among all those people who have relatives in long-term care facilities introduced by the provincial government, but you must know some of the conditions which now exist, and we must be assured that action is going to be taken to correct all of these conditions. For instance, the investigative survey teams have shown up to now that there are 143 particular complaints about particular homes, and there are in Vancouver alone 64 sets of troubles, the Lower Mainland 52, Okanagan 24, and another not on the little table there, 20 odd in Victoria, British Columbia. And what are these complaints and investigations about? It's almost hard to credit, but let me give you a short summary just off the top. Breaches of fire regulations in long-term care facilities, scabies, mishandling of medications, residents in unauthorized accommodation, poor or missing records of comfort monies, lack of proper medical attention, residents, this is the final indignity you might think, required to pay for toilet paper, filthy conditions, poor attitudes of staffs, refusal to pay back overcharges, and $35,000 or more of patients' trust funds held in accounts with no interest paid. We're going to go into that in detail this morning, but also this morning we're going to take a detailed look from the union side of the newspaper strike. The Vancouver Express came out with its second issue today, and later in the studio there will be Phil Needham of the Guild and the Joint Council, and hopefully a spokesman for the Pressmen's Union. But first this morning we're going to speak with Isabelle Kimmitt, the Executive Director of the province's long-term care program. Before I ask Isabelle Kimmitt to explain these incredible problems in long-term care, I want to give you a rundown from some reports I got my hands on of the specific types of complaints which are being investigated right now and hopefully will continue to be investigated by the review teams and the long-term care staff. And I want to start at the very top. You heard me talk about the 35,000 in trust accounts with no interest apparently, overcharging, laundry and nursing care, lack of proper records for medical or comfort money, poor food, short staffing, poor patient care, overcrowding, and something funny about room differential charges, no operating licenses or the wrong operating licenses, thefts due to poor security. I'm a little ahead of the monitor. Overcrowding, there are 13 cases. Room differential, there are 18 cases which are under questioning at this particular time. 16 of the wrong type of licenses. Theft because of pure security, 3. Bad fire conditions I was telling you about earlier on, 4. Use of air mattress for a patient. Can you imagine that in one particular case? Lack of supplies, maybe that's an administrative problem, but it's important. Residents restrained without a doctor's order. We'll discuss that kind of thing with Isabelle Kimmitt too. The case of sexual molesting is a sad one. I doubt if we'll go into it, but there may be a point there that we should make for the benefit of other operators of other homes. Listen to this one. Couldn't get downstairs to eat, and the front door wouldn't open in the place. Whether that's still happening, maybe we'll find out from Isabelle. Cold. Common complaint for many years. No proper heating. But when the government money is involved, that's different. Residents working, doing the staff work. Well, some therapy's all right, but don't overdo it, I think would be the general principle on that. Scabies epidemic, we've heard about that before. Just the one case that we know of. Operator failed to report a missing patient. We've heard about that one before, too. Buy your own toilet paper. Can you imagine? Eh? Isabelle, that was a broad rundown. As a matter of fact, you gave me a list from your consolidated information, which is even more horrifying than mine. Is that not correct?
It's more complete.
It's more complete. More horrifying, perhaps?
Yes, yes.
Has something gone wrong with the long-term care program, which has allowed this kind of thing to kind of develop, or has it always been like this prior to the intervention of the government?
Yeah, I think that basically what has happened is that with the long-term care program, we are into facilities and visiting facilities much more than previously. And also, we see more people. You see, it used to be, as you know, we were only responsible as government for the payment for people who could not pay for their care themselves. And now, of course, anybody who's in an opted-in facility does get government support. And in order to get that, we have to assess what their need is. So that means that of the 16,000 people roughly who are in facilities that we pay for, we see those people more frequently than we would have before, and we're in and out of facilities for that purpose. Now, because of this, we've become much more aware than we were through annual inspections, perhaps, of the complaints. Also, we're seeing the patients individually, and they're able to tell us, or their families have access to people who they can complain to.
Well, now, I've been around a long time. When I saw these investigative team reports, I thought, this is a palpable disgrace on the face of British Columbia, that any homes, and we're going to discuss some examples, should be operated and discovered by your investigators to be operating in this manner. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, you're right, and of course that's why we set up the complaint review team. We felt that the resident or the resident's family had to have, if you like, a type of ombuds person that they could go to and complain to without fear of reprisal. If they complain to the operator where something's wrong, you know, they could be hassled and so on. So this is why we set it up. Now,
about how many teams did you set up and when?
Well, there were 6 people, 2 teams, one in Victoria and one in Vancouver. And they were set up, gosh, I can't remember, June, July?
June, July.
Right.
But 6 teams for 16,000 people in care.
Okay, but...
6 people, rather, for
right.
16,000 in care.
Well, interestingly enough, Jack, they've been able to keep up, more than keep up with the complaints that have come in. And we've actually had them doing spot checks, like just going into facilities and seeing how things are, and bolstering up the licensing staff.
But am I not correct that you are dropping all your investigative teams as of the end of October?
No,
Finished, kaput?
No, you're not correct, thank goodness.
Was that not the plan?
No, it was never the plan to drop them. We've cut it down to 3 full-time people, and one of the team has gone back to her job with Corporate and Consumer Affairs, but would be available to us. Now, if those people can't keep up with it, we can add on again.
So at the moment you've got how many in Vancouver working on these complaints?
We have 2 in Vancouver and 1 in Victoria.
What about the rest of the province?
Well, the 2 in Vancouver travel over the rest of the province.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that we want to do is to encourage people to complain. That sounds terrible,
odd.
But we don't know unless people tell us.
Well, now, you know, that's a little bit odd, Isabelle. You say you want to encourage people to complain. I don't remember getting on my desk from your office a list of the results of the survey investigative team so that you could tell the public about these abominable conditions in certain homes. Were you going to keep them secret?
No, what we've been doing with them is when the complaint review team gets a complaint, you'll notice most of those things, if you were to read the Community Care Facilities Licensing Act, are against the, that act and regulations. And what we do when we get a complaint is we investigate it fully, and then under our own licensing act, we can quite often bring that person before that facility before the board, and we can either suspend or remove their license if it's warranted.
How many licenses have you removed or suspended as a result, or taken action to challenge as a result of this 143 plus 20 odd from Victoria, 160, 170 complaints?
We probably have over 20, I'm being conservative, that are under investigation. We have one that in fact we have suspended the license. We have several that are coming before the board in the next 2 months.
And they'll come up to show cause why the license should not be removed.
Right. Jack, there's two kinds of complaints that we get. One where an operator perhaps genuinely didn't know, or maybe was being a little slipshod and is willing to improve, and if they demonstrate that they're willing to improve, that's fine. There are others that this has been a pattern for a number of years, and those are the ones that we're most concerned about.
Let's look at the trust funds for a start. From your very own list it says here, trust accounts in excess of 35,000 held with no interest paid. Is that one incident or the cumulative total of all?
No, that's a particular incident, that one. Trust accounts, again, you see, we were not involved with a lot of these people beforehand, so we didn't know what people had, and a person that had 35,000 wouldn't have needed any assistance from the government at that time.
But am I not right in thinking that perhaps in this case, and in other cases, the 35,000 is in a bank account not under control of the patient?
Well, it was at that time. It is now under the control of the public trustee. What we've been doing is we've been working very closely with the public trustee to get he or his staff in to protect these particular individuals, and also to protect the operator. I mean, there's no way operators should have to be responsible for that kind of money.
Let me look at one home, and this is from the most recent report. This is a report dated in your meeting of October the 13th. Such and such home. Patient care. Smell of urine, no locked drawers, no signal devices, wards look crowded, no comforts records, room differentials, we'll explain later, nurses stationed behind the kitchen on the first floor while some heavy care patients are maintained in basement. Would that be automatically investigation and application to suspend that home?
Yes.
It would be?
Oh, yes. Now, that I don't know the specific home, or I can't bring.
But that's the kind of circumstance.
That's the kind of circumstance, and that would be before the board immediately.
And you can lift a license.
We can lift the license.
All right. Now, of the 16,000 people in care, in personal type care.
Personal intermediate.
That's right. Not in extended care of the government, not in home facilities, elsewhere. Of that type of person, that type of home. Off the top of your head, would you give 50% of them good marks?
Oh, I'd give 50% of them good marks, but the other, I'd have to say that also out of 44 spot checks that we did, we had 22 that we had to follow up on. That means that 50% of them were okay, but 50% of them we had concerns about, and some of these severe cases would have been amongst them.
I'll give you some more examples in a moment from your reports, Isabelle Kimmitt. I think we're into it already. I don't know if we'll need it. Have you got that one up there?
We've got these if you want to just go.
Yeah,
on this, for example, we're working with the banks to
tell what I'm doing is the guild people are, if we go. Do that one. Let's go up to this one. Yeah.
This one or this one?
Yeah. Let's take it from the top.
Individual complaints?
We'll just go through these individual complaints.
Okay, this is something different.
9 beds in 1 room. That's the part. That one there.
Okay.
It's continuing investigation.
Okay.
Isabelle Kimmitt, we'll take time this morning to spell out precisely what these places can and cannot charge for, right?
Okay.
But first, I want to go to some individual complaints. These are just summaries from your own reports. And here's the first one. Vancouver, 9 beds in 1 room and 1 upstairs bathroom for 38 patients. Doesn't that seem quite I mean, 9 beds if it's the right room, but suspecting the kind of place, I bet it's horrible.
Well, one of the things we're living with at the present time is that we have some old facilities which were licensed a number of years ago, and until we complete our building of some new facilities, we won't be able to replace those. Now, when that place was licensed, that was legitimate. Of course, now we only license facilities with single rooms, but some of those were grandfathered in when the Act changed. Now, we have a building program going, mostly with nonprofit societies, to develop new facilities, but it will take us probably from 2 to 5 years to have sufficient beds to face all of them.
Have there been any Johnny-come-latelys who've come into the building into the business of taking money from you so they can finance their so-called personal care homes? This is what I'm afraid of. That the money is available, and let's say you've got 20 or 30 patients at how much a month, and you've got an old place. Can I rush in and get it licensed and make my fortune and buy my buildings on the backs of these old people?
You're mixing up 2 things. One of them is that we are really being very strict about who we will license these days. I'm not saying that that wasn't happening before, but we're demanding that the person will have some experience in the care field. You can't have just run any other business and think you can give care. And we're doing a more thorough investigation and questioning people before we license them.
But you basically, surely your thrust must be to only allow non-profit societies in.
Basically, that's true. We're not excluding private operators, but we're giving preference to non-profit societies.
I want to make it quite clear that I know at least one, if not more, operations which never opted in and which still take private patients and do a good job at reasonable money, right?
Yes.
Not that many of them, but I know some.
There's a few. There are about 5% of the facilities in the province are still not opted in, although some of those, Jack, are now coming into the program effective January 1st. I don't know how many.
Burnaby, here's one here. I can look up the detail, but it's an overcharge to residents in 1 month of $4,800.
Well, that's collective, not to one person.
No.
Right.
Overcharges. How come they're overcharging these places, some of them?
Some of them say that they didn't understand the policy to begin with.
You mean the operators?
Yes.
Oh,
and we are being quite rigid in that they have to pay back. Now, how we're handling that is if they're paying back to the residents what we consider as an overcharge, then, and they don't do it again, as it were, we accept the fact that it was confusion in terms of the policy. But if there's, if they won't pay it back, then we're pressing charges, fraud charges.
Fraud charges. Yes. I think there was one case in all these reports where the operator was charging you people for the money and also collecting from the patients, right?
Yes, yes, at least one. There's more than one.
At least one, more than one.
Yes.
And if they don't pay it back instantly, the RCMP or the police are called in.
Yes.
Now, let's look at Coquitlam. And here we have one here. This is an unhappy one. There was some sexual molesting, there was a bad smell, there was a lack of supplies, there was a trouble over room differential, comfort monies were not paid, and again there was overcharging. You probably know the place as well as I do, right?
Yeah. What
have you done about it? I mean, the sexual molesting, I understand, was an unfortunate incident, was it not?
Yes, and
but it took time to get it corrected, as I recall.
Well, it usually takes time because those things often are not reported, Jack, and we can't correct what we don't know about. And licensing staff have often been aware, but have had a hard time actually getting the evidence. You know, unless we can prove that something's happened, you can't go in. There are good operators, you know, and you can't go in and just close them down.
I know the difficulty.
But in this kind of situation, I can assure you that steps are being taken to close those kind of places.
I mean, I know the difficulty myself. If old people come to me, one has got to make a quick judgment. Are they exaggerating? Are they a little bit senile? Do they really know what they're saying to me? And many a time the complaint can be brushed aside as something on which you can't base a proper investigation.
But the thing is that, you know, if you're getting messages only from 1 or 2 people, that's one thing, but if you're getting quite a few, and if our team goes in and finds things wrong.
Well, smell, of course, is easy. They clean up the dash place.
Yes, yes.
But do they clean up when your people nag?
Well, they do if we nag, and we are nagging. They do, or else they don't get a license.
You see, I'll be quite honest, I was disappointed in the health department in Vancouver when I was looking into the case of scabies. It seemed to me that all they did was send down a note and say, here, do this to boil the bed linen. That didn't seem to be enough. Is it good enough for you?
Well, the problem that they had in that instance, and I'm not excusing the instance at all, but they had nowhere to move those people to. So the best that they could do, and I think that they did try to get the place cleaned up and work with the operator.
But one doesn't feel that there's any great invasion of public health officials to say, throw that out, burn that, clean that, dump the lot. Because that's what the old man had to do, leave his clothes there.
Right. I would hope that you're wrong about that, and I would hope that that particular situation is not common. Look, you know,
that was a case
the ones that we're talking about are pretty horrendous. All of the things that we're investigating are not that bad.
Comfort monies. Everybody in a long-term care home who has no other income. Tell me about comfort monies. Let me not guess.
Okay, comfort money is what's provided by the Ministry of Human Resources for people who don't have their old age pension and don't have any money of their own, and it's up to $40 a month to spend. It's pocket money.
And how do they get that in their hands?
Well, now I'm speaking for the Ministry of Human Resources, and perhaps I shouldn't do that, but it's now paid out to the individual. Sometimes it's paid out in a lump sum to the facility, but they're changing that now and they're paying it to the individual. And
so he turns over his total check, or the government takes his total check from Human Resources and gives him back $40.
The operator does, yeah, if the operator takes the check and gives it back. Now, we require that the operator keeps an accurate record of if he holds that money.
You have found many cases where operators have not kept proper records of comfort monies.
Yes, we found quite a few. Now, we've been giving them direction on how to keep records of that, because some of them really didn't. It wasn't willful, okay? So we're trying to sort out which wasn't willful.
You mean it was just sloppy?
Right. We're also working with the banks, Jack, because there is one facility, it's a non-profit facility, where the Royal Bank, I shouldn't... Okay, goes in one day, it goes in on the day the checks are issued, and it does the banking for people. Now, we have one of our people in the Ministry of Health working with other banks with the suggestion that they might offer this service to care facilities so that the operator wouldn't have to handle the money, so he's not in a bad position. And it is an awkward position for them.
That's a great idea.
The residents protected.
Nothing I'd like better than to see a young bank person go in and say, okay, here's your comfort money, I'll take the check or whatever, and here's an account for the operator. More with Isabelle Kimmitt. Isabelle Kimmitt, I think that despite your cooperation this morning and your willingness to concede that there are imperfections, I think the public must have a total reassurance that these complaints are handled instantly and not allowed to sit around. Are they really?
Yes, they are. That's why we set up the complaint review team, because it was difficult to handle them instantly through our long-term care administrators in all instances. So, you know, we like an investigation to be done as soon as we get the thing in, within a day, or if it's in a part of the province we have to travel, within a very short time.
Here's one in Vancouver, personal care home. No nursing care after 3:30 p.m. or on weekends. 5 trust accounts in matrons' names. Residents restrained all day, every day. Later on, well, that's one. And there are many cases which say dirty bathtubs. Residents not served same amounts of food as staff. Poor housekeeping, strong smell of urine on main floor, residents restrained without a doctor's order. And that was a private hospital allegation is there.
Well, all those things are contraventions of the Licensing Act, and we have legislation we can act immediately in those instances to suspend the license, providing it's well documented. And this is one of the things that the review teams are able to do. I was looking back in the record earlier this morning of one facility that we're investigating, and we've done evening visits during the night, just to bring out some of those things. So I think I can assure you that we're instantly responding to complaints of that nature.
How about this one? How could you respond to this except by closing the place down? Broken window with glass still in, covered up with boards on outside. Bare light bulbs, rotten boards with pieces missing, slippery surface when wet and fire escape. no grab bars in bathroom, no fire extinguishers, no call bells.
Okay, if
Report
that,
will be sent to so-and-so and fire marshal will be contacted.
if that was the first, if it had just got like that and that was the first report of that nature, we would give that operator a time frame, a very short time frame, to upgrade and to meet the regulations. And during that period, he'd be on an interim permit rather than a license. And if he, demonstrated that he was going to upgrade and he was going to meet the regulations and provide proper care, then he would remain in business. If he didn't, then we would not continue to use the facility. But let me get in one thing. Jack, what do we do until we have enough care facilities with those people? Now, we're doing two things. One is, as I said, we're building new facilities. We're also putting a really heavy emphasis on our home support program. In other words, keep people in their homes as long as possible. And that's our alternative. But once people are in a care facility, they've usually given up their home and there's nowhere for them to go to. So we quite often have to leave them where they are, do the best we can to watch that they're getting proper care until either it gets better or we can move them elsewhere, and sometimes we move them.
Well, there seems to be a great gap where people like myself have had many complaints over the years about individual homes, and we knew that the inspection service of the provincial government, to say the least, was inadequate, not enough people. Here you are now in a situation, we talked about one case earlier, where you'd love to close the home right now, I'm sure. But you say, where are we going to put these old people? So therefore you must keep these places with the substandard conditions open. You're in a bind.
Not those kind of substandard conditions. The kind of substandard conditions that we keep open are where the staffing is adequate, where the physical building doesn't meet our regulations, but it's clean, the care is good, etc.
And talking of staffing,
okay.
What kind of staffing do they really have? There are a dozen reports here of understaffed, no staff after 3:30 p.m., no this and that and the next thing. Your standards must be very low for personal care homes.
No, they're not. But the operators obviously are not meeting the standards and the regulations. The regulations cover quite adequately the staffing, but in those instances you quote, those people are not meeting the regulations.
All right, and the 170 complaints which are in front of you right now, how long will it be before these matters are totally repaired? In terms of trust funds, poor food, smell of urine,
Oh gee, well if we're talking about things like
without doctor's orders.
Okay, if we're talking about things like smell of urine or patient care, we would, for example, we had one facility that we brought to Victoria a few weeks ago, and it was a Friday afternoon, and we told them that not Monday morning, but when he got back to where he came from, he was to get the staffing fixed and that we would be in to see, and we sent somebody in that weekend to see that the staffing was adequate, because that's one thing they can't do without. They can't look after people without adequate staff.
Don't you think this massive material which your people have collected warrants not a 3-man investigative staff, but a 30-man investigative staff to check for public interest the whole place in the province of BC?
No, Jack, what we're doing, which I think is probably more important, is that we have people working on our legislation to make sure that all these kinds of things are all these needs are spoken for in the legislation. We're also upgrading, or I shouldn't say upgrading because we have some very good inspection staff, but we're taking a really close look at what our inspection staff should be and whether we have enough of them.
If I were a person with a relative in an old folks' home or some kind of home listening to Webster and Kimmitt this morning, I'd think, my God, how are they being treated when I'm not there?
That concerns me because, the way we're talking, it sounds like almost every care facility in the province is really rotten, and that's not true. But if
there are some very fancy names in these reports where I would not have suspected some of these conditions.
Yeah, and that's what we needed to find out. When we set this complaint review team up, we had been getting some complaints, and we didn't know whether it was 1% or 50% or what of the places that
Now you suspect it's 50%.
No, I suspect that it's probably in total about 25% that there are flagrant, can't think of the word, but
flagrant abuses of the regulations and the patients.
Yes.
25%.
Okay, but
that might be 4,000 people.
Yeah, but then I have to also say that in a lot of those cases, when we go in, the operators do conform immediately to the regulations. So that I think that one of the difficulties we had was that people didn't complain.
Well, now, is it perhaps the whole community is to blame? And when they put old granny or grandpa in there, they won't even go see him at weekends, if the old people have any relatives.
That's to some extent true, but I think I remember talking to you once before about this, that a lot of the people in care facilities don't have relatives. Like, most people who put their relatives in a care facility do go and visit.
An example of old John and Carl Matson.
Right.
They had between them, he's gone now, not reported missing for a week later, $300,000. Easily accessible. I found one of his bank books in the waste paper basket. You know, we're looking for it. $57,000 in the bank book. And yet somebody put him in a rest home when he had ample money to be cared for in the best place in the province. How could that happen?
Well, I'm not sure when he actually went into that home, but he wouldn't have been placed by...
July he was placed.
Oh, okay.
He was, one of yours. It means that somebody didn't bother to get up close to him and say, "Hey, John, have you got any money?" And John would have said, "Yeah, I got about $150,000.
Okay, that's fair enough. There are two things. In Vancouver, we don't often have a choice of where to place people, and you know, we could go on about that forever. And also, I guess I'd have to concede that maybe we should be making more effort to be sure, and we are now, that if people have money, it's being looked after. Again, we've talked to the public trustee. It used to be, you know, the public trustee could only go in if a person was certified and capable, and that's no longer true. He can go in if a person's at risk and can assist them.
He's
or their
now
family,
acting as
etc.
curator for John's brother Carl,
Right.
who has something like $200,000 in the safety deposit box in Vancouver. We're going to take phone calls too this morning, Isabelle. Are you on the topic? Hold on, please. No names. Before we go to the phones, Isabelle Kimmitt, my guest is Isabelle Kimmitt, the Executive Director
Yes.
of Long-Term Care Program, which started when?
January 1st this year.
You unhappy about the whole deal?
No, I'm very happy about it.
Except for this mess.
Yes.
And this is a mess.
But we're getting into this.
What I'd like you to tell people, what are they not allowed? For instance, I saw one case here, the allegation is made that one man was given 5 haircuts in 1 month. Looks to me like a way to beef up the bill, right?
In this day and age, it seems a bit
A little bit
much.
extravagant, doesn't it? What can they not charge the patient for?
They can't charge the patient for standard accommodation, for their meals, including therapeutic diets, for regular laundry, that's the regular stuff that can be put in the washing machine and handled that way. They can't, for care, the nursing care or the whatever other care they need. They have to provide a program of entertainment or socialization, and they can't charge for that. They can't charge for what we call personal hygiene supplies. That's the normal things that you use, like soap, toilet paper, etc.
They can't charge for that.
They cannot charge for that. Now, if a person wants to use Chanel No. 5 soap, then they should buy that for themselves. But regular soap and so on is provided.
What can they charge for?
They can charge for things like a personal telephone. They can charge for Cablevision, only at their cost, telephone only at their cost. They could charge for example, if a person's wearing clothes that require dry cleaning or some kind of special treatment, they can charge for that. They can charge the room differential for above standard accommodation, providing it's approved by the long-term care administrator.
Providing you people say, okay, charge it.
That's
you
right.
found many cases where they were charging room differential without your approval.
Yes, and we've corrected that and asked them to pay back right to the beginning of the program.
That'll go back to the individual.
Yes.
Have any operators refused to pay back?
Some are being a little slow, and we have 2 of those coming before the board this month. Most of them have paid it back, and so that's fair enough.
What's the waiting list for long-term care?
Do you know,
Waiting time.
The waiting time, it depends where you are. If you're in Victoria, it could be several
How
months.
does one know if one is concerned about an elderly relative who cannot be maintained at home? What kind of place you're putting them into? You don't want to go into smell of urine, poor food, restrained without doctor's orders, trust funds being handled in funny ways.
You do you do get a chance to go and look at the facility. We don't just take the person and place them. And we give people, by and large, their choice. Now, if the need is really urgent, they may have to go somewhere while they, if they can't be maintained at home. But at the present time, we're willing to put in almost full-time homemaker service while the person's waiting. So if the family can accommodate a homemaker, and admittedly it's not all that easy to get a person who wants to work 24 hours a day.
But your people probably get into a snit if I take my old granny up somewhere and say, I'm not going to put her in that horrible place. You'll say, that's all we got. Take it or leave it, like it or lump it.
No, we won't. We'll say that's all that's available at the moment. We'll try and give you some help at home until somewhere else becomes available.
A word of caution to the callers this morning. I have not named any of the institutions mentioned in these reports for the simple reason it's not my investigation. It's the investigation of other people, and I believe them to be correct, but it's not fair perhaps to damage a good place with one complaint against it.
Well,
and I don't know there's any volume of complaints.
I think what I want to do is reassure people who are watching who have relatives that all the complaints that we've had are under investigation. Some of them are coming before the board this month, and that if we know something's wrong, we're watching it very closely.
Isabelle, you said how many licenses up for suspension? You gave me a figure earlier, I forget
Well, there's about 20 being investigated with that in mind, but I can't tell you.
Well, if 20 out of the number of homes you've...
Well, that's out of about 500
That's
facilities.
20 out of 500 facilities. Right. I was trying to work it out for the whole province. Never mind, we'll go to the phones. Are you there? Oh, just a moment, please. I took the wrong one. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
What about a place that have the patients so very heavily sedated at all times, and they're slapped, they're punished by being locked in the bath?
Question, have you seen this yourself?
It happened to my father.
Who told you about it?
I was there. I saw him, and I saw it happen.
You saw him being punished by what?
He was so heavily sedated that he couldn't talk or answer anybody. When he missed the bed, he was slapped, and the bed wasn't changed.
Were you there when he was slapped?
I got into a fight with an orderly, and I slugged an orderly because he slapped my father.
What did you do about it?
What could I do?
What have you done? When did this happen, by the way?
It's almost 4 years ago now.
Well, now, 4 years ago, you see, you spoiled what might have been, not spoiled, but I can't take that call as a valid complaint
well, let me
today,
answer,
can I?
though, if that were happening...
I argued about this with the hospital staff, and I finally got my father moved to another room. This is a government hospital.
Perfectly valid, but out of time and place. There's no point in following that up now, 4 years ago. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Isabelle. Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
The one honest question, please. Answer to a question. I would like to know if any of these institutes have been closed. Out of the 170 complaints you got,
have any yet been closed? Good question.
We have removed the residents from more than one. We've suspended admissions to a number, and I can't say that we've closed any because we have to have proof, and it has to come before the Community Care Board, which we have some coming up this month. The operator has to have the opportunity to speak for himself before the board.
When did you start this whole long-term care?
We started long-term care on the 1st of January.
1st of January, so therefore...
Oh, we have closed places in the past, even before long-term care, under the Community Care Facilities Licensing Act.
Taken away licenses?
I couldn't give you a number. Taken away licenses, I mean, that's what the board's there for.
But you have a number of operators coming up this month to show cause why the licenses should not be removed.
Correct.
Meanwhile, the patients are still there. If the licenses are removed, you will have to empty those places
That's
forthwith.
right. We have to have a solution for the patients.
Yeah, that's a big problem. You've got to have a place to put them. Like there was a bit of a problem trying to find old John a place to go. Fortunately, St. Paul's accepted him, even though he was not acutely ill. He only had scabies. And now we found a rest home that didn't opt in, and the relatives have gone back to Sweden, and we'll keep in touch and perhaps take him home eventually.
Of course, Jack, let me mention, if we can correct the situation where it is, working with the operator, that's preferable, because we had an instance where we were sure we could prove that there was wrongdoing on the part of an operator. But the residents, that was their home, they'd been there a long time, and much as they had problems, they didn't want to move. And we had,
well, that's like getting used to staying in jail.
Well, you may well say that, but it took us a number of weeks before we could find alternate placements close enough.
Time for a break. Isabelle Kimmitt, what do you do about those places where they use in your own letter excessive restraints, sometimes without doctor's orders?
Well, if they're using them without doctor's orders, they, once we know about it, they have to stop. That relates also to the comment that was made about over-sedation, although it didn't apply in this instance, it was so long ago. But we've been working with the pharmacare people, and we have one pharmacist responsible for each facility now. So the pharmacist is responsible for telling us if a person's getting too much medication. We also have introduced a unit dose system, as you know, to control that.
Tough.
So it is tough.
Go ahead, please.
Jack, I had 3 points I wanted to bring up. First of all, I think your program right now should be called As the Stomach Turns, because I think that of all the complaints that Isabelle has had, she can turn around smiling and say, well, the operators, like concerning the broken window in one specific place, well, the operators, well, they didn't really know what they were doing, or, they didn't mean to do it, and they keep giving them chances. I worked in the human resources a couple of years ago doing documents for Ottawa, like investigating the costs of these homes in British Columbia. And they go between, I think, $350 to $500 per month per patient. And the majority of homes, or a lot of the homes...
Why do you call it As the Stomach Turns? Don't you believe that Isabelle's staff and the public health people, the Metropolitan Health Unit, etc., act quickly enough?
I doubt it, Jack. If you hadn't brought up the story about these two brothers this week, we wouldn't have heard anything about it. It would have been all covered up.
But that wouldn't have meant that nothing was being done about it.
Well,
I think that it's important.
Being done about it, or the girl wouldn't have had to appear in Jack Webster's program.
Well, no, there's a couple of points there. The matter was obviously under investigation when I got into the picture, but the fact that I get into the picture makes it a little more action, quicker action as possible.
It made it fairly public, but that was coming before the board this month.
Yes, it was. Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Mr. Webster?
Yes.
I just took my mother out of one of those places.
What kind of place? A personal care home?
Care.
Personal care?
Yes.
Why?
I've just had her home with me for 3 weeks. She came out of the hospital. Lack of food. She had to have blood transfusions. And I also phoned and told them about it. Isabelle's place. I phoned Victoria. I phoned Vancouver. I gave my name. I gave my phone number. But my mother now, I've had her home for 3 weeks. When I used to go see her, she was sleeping half the time. Now she's as bright as can be. I put her in there because I thought she'd have company. You know, they do nothing. They don't have entertainment.
How many people in the facility?
I would say possibly, maybe 300.
Oh, are you talking about the one out at UBC?
No, I'm not. No, it's over the bridge.
Well, that must be an extended care thing.
No,
not necessarily. No, but there aren't very many of that size.
It's a personal care home. And I will. The only one thing I will say is that they did keep it clean, but the food was atrocious.
Well, let me just ask you too. Are you able to manage your mother at home?
Well, I'll tell you what I did now. They said, "Oh, you couldn't look after your mother because she has to have a diabetic needle and she has to have her urine tested." And they came for 5 days, and the nurse was great, and we do it ourselves for her.
Right, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's the major thrust of the program, is to help people like you to keep your parents at home.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
I find this so appalling I can barely speak. You know what I'm worried about? I have no brothers, no sisters. I'm no children. What would happen to me if I was in one of those homes? I'd want to commit suicide before I'd ever be put in.
Yeah, I guess that's why the other lady was criticizing me for sort of making excuses. I want to reassure people there's a lot of good care facilities in this province too.
They are private enterprise, aren't they?
No, no, no. About half of the beds are in non-profit societies, and some of the private enterprise homes are very good too. We're talking about a small section.
Well, it's not that small a section, Isabel.
Okay, it's a bigger section than we would like to see by far.
And
You say you're acting instantly, and then you say it's coming before the board this month. I could be dead before it comes before the board.
No,
Why
because
isn't it done now, immediately? Why isn't there a team of people going into these places? I've never had occasion to go into one of these places, so I'm
there is.
being
As soon
emotional
as,
right now.
As soon,
Why
if you
isn't
hold,
it happening now, not coming before the board? The bureaucracy are killing people.
If you hold on a second, I'll explain. When we get a complaint, action is taken immediately. We have staff go in. We ensure that the residents are being looked after properly as soon as we know there's anything wrong.
Isabel,
but
I've
we
got to
can't
stop
close
you.
the place down.
If you get a complaint, not when you get a complaint, if you get a complaint.
That's very important because, you know, up until now, people didn't feel they could complain for some reason.
I know, but this is the point she's making. The place I was in the other day, right? Your people found the problem. Your people investigated the problem. But even when I moved in and had a horrendous conversation with the operator, the gravity of the situation didn't seem to impress him in the slightest. The fact that he hadn't reported the man missing to the police for a week after he didn't come back for bed checks, you know. The fact that scabies was still in the place. You know, I must admit, my hair stood on end and I walked out of there muttering and mumbling, why isn't the place closed now?
Yeah, well, our hair stood on end too in that particular
But
instance.
then you came back with a problem, which I must recognize, that you've got to find a place to put 20, 30 or 40 people.
Yeah.
And you haven't got them.
No.
And many of these people are institutionalized, in effect.
Well, if they've
not-
been there a long time, but also they've usually not got a place to go back
I'm
to.
glad you called, caller, because I'm now going to ask Isabel. You had 6 members of an investigative probe as of the end of October. Now you only have 3.
Right.
Shouldn't you have 12? For the sake of public confidence in the way people
Well,
are being
if
treated.
we were getting enough complaints to be investigated, we would have as many people as it took to
All right,
investigate
are you
them.
telling me, Isabelle Kimmitt, that if as a result of this program and other publicity which will follow, you get a mass of complaints from all over the province of BC, some real, some not so real, some fanciful, that you can get sufficient staff to investigate complaints forthwith?
Well, a question of whether I can get the kind of staff that we need, but we would make every attempt. We got the staff we had before in a very short time, and we've kept on the 3 senior
This
people.
is an unfair question to yourself, a government employee.
No, I think that it's a fair question, and I know that I have the ministry's support in this kind of investigation, so I'm sure that that would be a priority. I have no difficulty in saying
All
that.
right. Do you now recommend that those neglectful people who haven't been to see their relatives in rest homes, or church groups, or any interested do-gooders, should go to their local rest home, personal care home, intermediate care, private hospital home, and say, we've come and announced we want to see your conditions, and if we don't like them, we're going to report you to the government forthwith? Would you recommend that?
Well, I think that if people have relatives they haven't visited, they certainly should go and visit them.
Right.
I question what you're saying because I think that that'll scare the wits not only out of the operators but of the people in the facilities. So I'd suggest that if people know of abuses and so on, that certainly they get in touch with us. But I think the other thing that you have to be very careful about is that if there really is something wrong, how you handle that is important. Now, we get complaints and we keep them confidential because we don't want that person, until we've been able to establish that there really is a problem and we can do something about it. That is, we have somewhere to take that person to. We don't want any kind of reprisal.
In other
It's
words,
a strong word,
take
but-
the case of...
The operator.
Pardon?
She is protecting the operator.
I'm not
It seems-
protecting the operator, I'm protecting the resident in the facility.
No, she has a point, caller. If I'm a poor old man or a poor old woman who's complaining bitterly about this and that, and somebody merely phones up the operator and says, old Webster's getting very difficult, the operator says, oh, we'll look after him, goes down and makes his life a misery.
Yes, I
So you must make a confidential inquiry on behalf of the patient. You really need a horde of snoops. You really do.
Well, we do have our licensing staff throughout the province.
Mr. Dr. Bonham told me for the city of Vancouver he used to have 2 health inspectors, and now he has 1 for this purpose.
Is this government, is this a social credit government that we're speaking of now?
Well, it's they started the program. Every other government, I must say in all fairness, promised it to them, including the NDP. Social credit may have started it too quickly.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up.
Too quickly. From Victoria to Isabelle Kimmitt, Long-Term Care Executive Director.
Mr. Webster,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm saddened and sickened by your program today and the one with the Swedish gentleman. It's too sad even to believe, but I'm wondering, I came up to Victoria from a town in California where 67% of the population were over 65. We had large nursing homes there, 99 bedders. They were built by a Hawaiian-American company.
Could you afford to stay in them?
Pardon?
Could you afford to stay in them?
Well, welfare and the paying people were all in the same homes. But I was...
Don't tell me that California has better facilities than we have, Isabel.
What?
Don't tell me California has better facilities than we have.
May I speak, Mr. Webster?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to tell you that the nursing homes were licensed by the state of California from Sacramento.
They are here.
The boarding homes were licensed by the welfare department. I was in charge of one big area, supervising. And I sent girls in the morning to watch the cooking, how much salt was put into the food. We dropped in all times of the day. We inspected the books with the monies these old people had. And I tell you, we didn't have very good-looking young ladies like you have there. We had real martinets who went in. And I'm wondering if they have registered nurses.
Okay, hold a second. We've got your message. Isabel, how would you respond to that call?
Well, we have and do everything the lady just outlined. We license all care facilities where care is given. If a person is giving care and they don't have a license, they can be put out of business. We do have inspection teams that go in just the way that lady described. And before the beginning of the long-term care program, we had lots of facilities, but people, as you point out, couldn't afford to go to them. Now, the long-term care program means that people can get their care provided regardless of their income. And the reason that we have the problem we're facing is because the long-term care program was brought in. I disagree with you that it was brought in too quickly, because I think it's because we now look after the majority of people that we have, we are addressing the problem.
Yeah, just to get this in balance, we are very proud, by and large, of our hospital services system in this country.
Mr. Webster.
Yes?
May I tell you, is there a registered nurse? Is there a registered nurse in every nursing home?
Well,
you've got to, your terminology is different, but in intermediate...
A registered nurse is a registered nurse.
Would you mind if I answer the question you've asked? In an intermediate care facility, there is always a registered nurse. In fact, depending on the number of people they're requiring care, there will be more than one, but there is one on duty every 24 hours. Now, personal care is probably what you're used to calling room and board, where the people, in fact, are relatively well, and we don't require a registered nurse to be there.
Then we must leave it, ma'am. We're being diverted, but thank you for your call. Go ahead, please.
Mrs. Jack there.
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Good morning, Jack, and Isabel. I'd like to ask a question. It's going about an intermediate care home. I'd like to know the age of the nurses' aides who are working in there, how old they have to be before they are accepted in one
Well, how old are the ones you know?
Pardon me?
How old are the ones you know?
High school girls.
Is that satisfactory for intermediate care?
No, not if they're working, that's hard to answer unless you have the specifics.
Write a complaint to Isabelle Kimmitt, K-I-M-M-I, Double T, Long-Term Care Victoria.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I urge everyone with a complaint to write to Isabelle Kimmitt in Victoria, rather than flood you with phone calls, right?
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'm interested in the solution. I can appreciate all the problems that you've been dealing with this morning because we have gone through that and experienced some of these. And I was just wondering if your person you're interviewing there this morning would be interested in having help through voluntary people with experience.
Okay, are you interested in voluntary help for these places?
We certainly are. If that person wants to get in touch with me, we're interested in anybody who wants to help.
Are you interested in old people being forced to do domestic chores around personal care homes?
No, well, you know, the way you put it, I would have to say no. There are some instances where old people, in fact, would like to help. Like, you know, women sort of want to do chores and stuff. But what we say is that if a person is doing something that would otherwise have to be done by the staff of the facility, they should be paid for it, and they should be paid the regular rate that anybody else would get for that work.
But the old dears should be allowed to dot about and wash a few dishes, perhaps,
sure.
or clean their room.
It's much better for them than sitting down all day.
But no hard floor scrubbing, any of that nonsense.
No, well, again, I would want our staff to know what the person was being asked to do and to have approved of it.
No cheap labor from patients.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm a recipient of the home care program. I can't say enough about it. It really has, in my opinion, has saved my life and sure helped my family a lot.
This is another aspect of your job.
Yes.
I know it has nothing to do with the extended care program, but I just have one thing to say on the subject of home care. Like I say, I can't say enough about it. It really is fantastic.
Well, that's praise. We're not dealing with praise this morning. Isabel will accept it gladly. The home care system is working well. Go ahead, please.
Yes, we have been dealing with a private hospital since July. My mother-in-law is in there. And we have had all the problems, I think, that you've mentioned on here. But we started complaining to long-term care as soon as we spotted these problems. And I can't, you know, they have been very, very helpful and very, very cooperative with.
Have they cleaned up the complaints?
In most cases, yes.
There I must leave you. If you have any other complaints, write to Isabelle Kimmitt. Let's sum up this morning, Isabelle Kimmitt. I got hold of your confidential reports, which show up 140. You add up 170 complaints, ranging from breaches of fire regulations to scabies, to trust funds being funnily handled, to missing records of comfort monies, to unauthorized charges, to 5 paying for toilet paper, 5 haircuts in 1 month. And you tell me, Isabelle Kimmitt, that you are not unhappy with your number of investigators being cut from 6 to 3.
No, I was part of that decision to have them cut. And while I say that, I also am saying that if it proves that we need more, we will get more.
Well, I think perhaps this program might have been good for the long-term care program this morning and making people who have relatives in it a little more, interested in the care of their relatives.
The long-term care program is there for the residents, and we intend to assist families to provide as good care as we possibly can. And if people have concerns or complaints, they go to their long-term care administrator in the local health unit, they go to the complaint review team. If they're having trouble beyond that, they come to me.
Isabelle
and we'll do
Kimmitt,
something about it.
Long-term care executive director, Victoria. Best of luck, and if there's any help I can give you, like nudging all the operators to watch their steps, please call on me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabelle Kimmitt. Next, we're going to deal with the Pacific Press dispute. We've got Phil Needham of the Joint Council on Bargaining and also the Guild, and a spokesman whose name I haven't got yet, I think from the Pressmen's Union. About Kieran Long.
Correct title is business agent for the Pressmen's Union. Okay.
It is probably one of the strangest and most unusual newspaper strikes in Vancouver's, British Columbia's history. I'm talking, of course, of the close down of Pacific Press, the double bed in which both the Sun and the Province meet and have their union, you might say, their own particular form of union. On the program the other day, we had Clark Davey, the brand new publisher of the Sun, and Paddy Sherman, the publisher of the Province. And they came out flat-footed, each of them, saying, this is not a strike about jobs, this is not a strike about security, this is a strike about feather bedding. With me this morning I have Phil Needham, who is president of the Vancouver Newspaper Guild and is co-chairman of the Joint Council of the of the unions bargaining in Pacific Press, and Gary Dunster, who is business agent for the Pressmen's Union. Phil and Gary, I want to quote from the first edition of your own paper. Just by the way, this might go so well you won't want to go back.
Never can tell.
The paper. How many pages this morning?
22.
22 pages. To quote, back to business, it's war, say the press unions. The trade unions believe that they are the latest victims of a continent-wide scheme aimed at destroying newspaper unions. Can you ask me to believe that?
Well, just look at the history of it in the past 2 years. The long strikes, the same things being attacked in each of the cities, the traditional spheres and the craft unions, and in each case there seems to be an effort to split the guild, which would be the largest component of a new newspaper union, which I think will eventually come about.
You mean split the guild from the craft unions?
Yes, very much so, just as happened at the Washington Post, and that situation is still in the courts.
Am I not right in thinking that by and large the craft unions and the guilds have given on issues of what the management called featherbedding, as recently in New York?
Yes, they have. Well, the ITU, that is the printers, they were up last year, and they gave on those issues that perhaps some areas could have been called featherbedding in there. I don't know those back shops all that well, but this is a different sort of issue.
Are you telling me, Phil, that the guild is with the pressmen and the craft unions solidly against management on the issue of featherbedding?
It's not a featherbedding issue, but we're solidly with the pressmen and with the other craft unions.
Now I must turn to Gary Dunster, business agent for the Pressmen's Union. What is the issue? I mean, I had Davy and Sherman both here the other day saying, it's featherbedding, and they ran an ad in your own paper this morning. The strike is against us. The strike is not about jobs. It's not about wages. It's not about automation, technology. It's about restrictive labor practices, otherwise called featherbedding. How can they say that if there is not more than a germ of truth in it, Gary?
Jack, there has never been any accusation by the company negotiating team, and I'm not talking about Mr. Sherman or Mr. Davies, but by the company negotiators that we have ever been accused of featherbedding during the negotiations. The first time that we heard that term was after the picket line went up. And I would suggest that because these statements are being made by people other than the negotiating committee, it is putting their committee, the company's committee, in a rather precarious position, because sooner or later we do have to sit down and talk.
They said to me, and they repeat it in this ad this morning, they have refused to talk about changes in work practice to bring them into the 20th century. That they have told you that they will guarantee no pressman loses his job, they will reduce the force only by attrition, and give you each, I think they called it, $1 million fund, up to $5,000 in cash right now, if you will give up these inefficient practices. You're telling me they didn't put this to you in negotiations?
No, I'm saying to you that we were never accused of featherbedding, which, if I understand it correctly by Mr. Sherman, that he made the statement that we have people standing around doing nothing. We have never been accused of that by the company negotiating team.
Featherbedding means to me men standing by, virtually without work to do, where automation has overtaken their job and where the company bites its teeth because it's paying for men who do not produce. That's what featherbedding means to me.
Jack, I assure you that is not happening in the press room. In fact, the new system that we now have at Pacific Press, the workload has increased by the introduction of the new system that we now have.
Sherman and Davy also said to me that when this proposition was put forward, you people said, we will not talk to you as long as this proposition is even on the table. Is that correct?
That is incorrect, because of the fact that during the course of these recent negotiations, and I might add there were some very long marathon bargaining sessions, that in fact we did discuss the company's proposal, and that in fact we also talked about the reasons why we could not accept their proposal. Well, now, if in fact, because you agree to disagree on any proposal, if that constitutes not bargaining, then I guess we didn't bargain. But in my opinion, yes, we did discuss these issues at the bargaining table.
Are you prepared to talk to them at any time?
Certainly.
If they drop this?
Well, the problem is the concept of what they are talking about versus what the concept that we have now.
Let me see if I can get this concept, Gary. Here is an employer who says, we'll guarantee jobs forever, right?
They haven't said that at the bargaining table, Jack.
Guarantee that not a single pressman will lose his job.
Don't
you have the overall guarantee from Pacific Press on that?
That looks to me like a new proposal. The proposal put in writing to the pressmen by Dave Stinson said that they would give them the same job guarantees as those that exist in guild jurisdiction, which is a very different sort of job guarantee than that given to the printers last year.
You're going to tie me up nuts, Phil. My understanding broadly of the Guild guarantee and the Pacific Press guarantee is that everyone will keep a job until they retire, but may well be asked to do something else or be retrained for something else, broadly speaking.
That, I think, would require a lot of goodwill on both sides in order to see that. But nevertheless, management does have the right to lay people off in guild jurisdiction and to dismiss them.
For reasons of economy.
For reasons of economy or for cause or for gross misconduct.
So first of all, you're telling me that the old job guarantees from Pacific Press you don't believe? You don't accept them?
No, a job guarantee is only as good as the life of the contract.
What about this guarantee here, that not a single pressman will lose his job? Reduce the force by attrition and give you $5,000 apiece to kind of sweeten the pot. Is that a crazy offer by the company?
Well, Jack,
I mean, to the average man in the street, it sounds like heaven on earth.
Okay, well, I think I have to explain exactly what that means.
Please.
When you talk about a $5,000 bonus, I suspect that that's the intent of it. And you talk about reducing the staff by attrition. Okay, it sounds, I'm sure, to the general public that that is a fair offer.
Right.
Okay. What really happens is that the average age, roughly, in the press room is 40 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we look at that and we say, okay, a person will work there from age 40 and probably till 65, just for argument's sake.
Right.
And for that 25 years, the workload in the press room will definitely stay the same and probably increase, no question. The workforce will definitely decrease, absolutely no question about that. So therefore, the work volume goes up. The amount of work that needs to be done in the press room increases. The number of people decrease. And that individual looks back at age 65 and he looks back at his $5,000 and said, really, what have I gotten for all of this?
A job till he was 65.
Okay. We're talking about the $5,000. What he really got, if you average it out, he got $2.50 per week after taxes.
But he got it now. I mean, 25 years from now, that $5,000 might be worth a nickel.
He might have got it now, Jack, but what he's going to get in the future is a heavier workload. Conditions that are, in my opinion, sweatshop conditions.
You say return to sweatshop conditions, no real job guarantees for life. The $5,000 is a kind of phony panacea, a phony gift.
Job guarantees are good for only the length of the agreement.
And am I not right in saying that if you accepted this, that by attrition, if this were a legitimate offer on the face of it, that if you accepted this, that by attrition your union local would eventually be wiped out?
Not the union local, the people that work at Pacific Press. That is not the only, that is not our total union. That is only one shop out of 33 contracts that we have.
You mean there's only the one contract in the Pacific Press?
Yes. Well, we have two. We have, we also represent the wholesale people, the drivers, the distributors.
The mailers, the distributors.
No, not the mailers. Distributors.
But am I right in that point, which I want to make, that if you accepted this, they would, in due course, by attrition, smash your local?
Not the local. They would, what they would do is...
Smash that contract?
Yeah, smash the contract, definitely, and they would reduce the force within the press room and increase the load and so on. No question about it.
Okay, more. Phil Needham of the Newspaper Guild. I'm going to come back to Gary on the Manning issue. But Messrs. Clark and Davy and, what's the fellow's name, Sherman, They raised the subject of unnecessary panic on your behalf in relation to job exclusions from the Guild. Could you give me your side of that story?
We bargained on Article 1, which is our coverage. Our contract says we have jurisdiction in all these different departments, and then we say, except the following, and like the Sun publisher, etc.
City editor.
Management people like that, very, very clearly management people. Those are excluded from our contract by title.
Like the publisher, the managing editor, assistant managing editor, city editor.
That's right.
Whatever.
All those people, yes, and different departments.
Right.
And then there's also an optional category for assistant department managers, columnists, payroll personnel, etc. Now, we had a proposal on that. We thought that at least one person on that list was not really fulfilling management functions. We proposed to delete that person. That was our proposal. The company said, delete the whole thing, and we'll put in that generalized language that comes out of the Labor Code, the new definition of an employee, as the legislation was amended, I believe, late last year or early this year.
BC Labor Code.
That's right. And that would just define an employee and what is a manager, but the company would decide which of the employees was a manager, and they would move them into that category, moving them out of the union. And if we had an objection, we could get our lawyer and go to the Labor Relations Board and appeal it. Appeals under the new under that Labor Code amendment, I'm told by our lawyer, there's a 6-month waiting list to get on there.
So you're saying, what do you regard as their deep, dark plan, therefore?
To create a very large non-union staff that would be capable of running an automated newspaper plant without assistance from the union.
Scab force?
Yes. Yes.
Do you believe that?
I heard, I heard that Patty Sherman said that was a hashish dream.
That's correct.
That there was a scab force.
Right.
That could not only run this plant, but would be available to go to other plants. There was no hashish dream. One of the management bargainers sitting at the table during one group of negotiations is known to have scabbed at the Ottawa Journal while it was down. We didn't provide the precedent, they did. It's no dream.
Bargainer, newspaper type bargainer? Newspaper executive type? Or a craft expert?
A craft expert, you could say.
Not a craft union man, a craft expert.
He used to be in a craft union, yes.
You're saying that with this generalized exclusion, they would try to steal enough people from you to run a scab paper, while at the same time you'd be hamstrung by a 6-month wait for an appeal on each individual case under the BC Labour Acts.
That could well be. And
is that a strike issue with Guild people?
It certainly is.
Didn't the Guild people come back at a meeting the other day and make you amend a motion from the table so that bargaining would start right away through the Joint Council?
The motion was that...
indicating a lack of support within the Guild.
Oh, no, it didn't indicate that at all.
What happened?
It indicated that the Guild negotiating committee should attempt to get back to the bargaining table. And frankly, people were confused by the wording of the motion. I don't chair meetings at Pacific Press, by the way, the unit chairman does. There were possibly 700, 800 people in that room. I would say that about 70 voted in favor of the motion, about 50 against. They were so confused. And I had to get up and ask the mover of the motion to clarify it. And did he mean, because that's a very point that I was concerned at. I wanted to find out. I said, do you mean that the Guild should break away from the Joint Council and go back to the bargaining table? And there was a roar throughout the entire crowd, no.
The Guild is solid?
The Guild is solid with the Joint Council.
Have you discussed money?
No.
What have you discussed?
These key issues.
Your exclusions and their manning.
That's right.
And that's about all?
Oh, no, actually, during we had 8 meetings with the company prior to mediation, and we had a great many meetings during mediation in which we went through other peculiar sections of each union contract, and they're minor issues.
Not strike issues?
No, none of them.
Back to Gary Dunster. Manning. You taking it away? No, you're not. Manning.
Yes.
Try and explain that to me. Davy and Sherman are both nice and simple and straightforward on it. They say Manning means feather bedding. We want to change the contract. What does Manning mean to you? Does it mean that you, in the Pressmen's Union, of which you're the business agent, control the number of people who go into the plant and you're hired through what you might say a union hiring hall, kind of?
Manning, Jack, is not an easy issue for a lot of people to understand. I will try to keep it as simple as I can.
I've been in the business 30 years and I still don't understand it.
Okay. Basically, and I would suggest for the reason that for the last 30 years that the company has agreed to our manning clause. First verbally, then it was written into the agreement in subsequent years. The reason they have agreed to it is because there is no feather bedding involved in it. Because if that, again, means people standing around doing nothing, then they would never have agreed to our manning clause in the first place. By that I mean the number of people that are determined who work on a given day is determined by the size of the paper and the number of color that is being run in that particular paper. In other words, if we have a rather large paper, the press capacity is larger because we need more press capacity. We need more men then, therefore, to run that particular edition. On the other side of the coin, if in fact the paper is small or smaller, less men are required on any given day. And
but don't you have the
basically,
same permanent workforce at all times?
we have approximately 70 regular employees that are guaranteed by the company 5 days employment per week. We have on top of that substitutes, that number around 20. Okay. We also have apprentices and paper handlers, you know, that don't fall under that category, but they do work in the press room.
Do you decide which men will go to work which day and for how long?
During the contract, in the contract, we have a clause of obligation to supply men. We are obligated to the company to supply those men by contract. We supply that through the workforce that we have in the press room. If they require, for instance, for a week, they give us an estimate on the preceding Friday for the following week.
In other words, you control the presence of the men in the plant under your manning contract.
They tell us how many people they want, and we supply.
And they want to smash that?
Yes.
Phones now on the Pacific Press dispute. Phil Needham, co-chairman of the, give me that proper title, please.
Co-chairman of the Joint Council of Newspaper Unions.
Now, who is now on strike? Who has not yet taken strike votes of the how many unions? 6?
The newspaper, right, 6. The Newspaper Guild and the Pressmen are on strike.
Right.
The other unions were locked out. That is the printers, the mailers, the engravers, and the wholesale drivers. Since we went out on the street, the mailers have taken a strike vote. I don't know whether or not they've served strike notice. It would be academic at this point. The vote in favor of strike was 96.9.
Printers on the picket line yet?
Yes, yes, they're locked out. They have locked out signs.
Everybody is now on the picket line.
That's right. It's a joint council picket line.
And right at the moment, the two issues which have brought you out, the first two unions out, is 1, manning with the pressmen, and 2, exclusions with the unions.
That's right.
Good. Now, just very briefly on this complicated manning, I have a picture in my mind that in New York, the bosses won the manning battle to some degree. That in Montreal, they have just signed a manning contract the same as yours. That in Winnipeg, they have a manning contract which is not, as from your point of view, as tough as yours. Am I correct?
Yes, you're very correct.
Is it therefore a fact that the Vancouver Manning Agreement is, from the company's point of view, the most advantageous one they have in their chain?
Yes. Yes, it is.
If you were to concede there were feather bedding or overmanning, there would be more such feather bedding or overmanning in their other operations.
Jack, I will never concede there's feather bedding because of the concept of the manning and the way it works. There is not. We do not have people standing around getting paid for doing that.
For papers printed with the workforce available, are more people needed in the other FP operations than in Vancouver?
Look, the situation in Montreal, the manning has been agreed to. They are still on strike, by the way.
Oh, didn't
they? Have been for 4.5 to 5 months. The manning issue has been settled. The people are still on strike. One of the other unions has another problem. Okay. The manning issue that they agreed to, the union and the company agreed to, for the concession of dropping down basically to our manning situation that we have here, The company guaranteed to the union that there will be no further negotiations on manning until 1983.
You would go for that?
Well, the company won't go for that. I asked Mr. Stinson about Montreal during negotiations at one particular time. He did not want to discuss.
I'm really trying to support Gary's case. If they have, from the point of view of FP Publications, which is now divided into two branches, FP Western and FP Eastern, is that right?
Is it? I don't know.
The Sun Publishing is gone.
Sun Publishing was a public company. It's been absorbed by FP, which is a private company. It doesn't have to answer to shareholders.
Do you concede that they're attacking the Vancouver Manning as part of this concerted war to smash the press unions?
Yes, I see it as that.
Knowing that it would cause a strike?
Yes, yes. They presented it to us in such a way that we had only two alternatives. Either just completely give in to the companies and see the eventual result of a non-union shop at Pacific Press, or else do as we did. And this seemed to be the better
alternative. Do you think they're trying to drive a wedge between you and the others so they can bring out a non-union paper?
It's been that...
With the Guild's assistance?
It's been that way every year, yes.
You know, I don't want to get into that any further because, you know, one side says one thing and one side says the others, and who am I to judge? Calls, where shall I go, Linda? Go ahead to Messrs. Needham and Dunster on the Pacific Press strike.
Good morning, Jack. I got a question here.
And try and keep to the point, please. I don't want generalized questions. I want Pacific Press questions.
Well, when was the last strike, and how long did it last?
Last strike, how long did it last?
There was a shutdown in the summer of 1976. That was a lockout after some job disruption which occurred after the ratification of a contract.
That was an awkward one.
Yes.
A little bit of a wildcat. It was settled. When was your last real strike? Lockout.
There was a brief one in 73, I think.
When did you last publish the Express?
In 1970.
1970.
That was the long shutdown.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, in regards to these strikes that are carried...
No, I'm not taking a general one on that. Go ahead, please.
Now, we suppose... Mr. Needham, please.
Speaking, go ahead.
Yeah, we supposedly had two newspapers in Vancouver, you know, but with one management. So you might as well just only have the one.
One publishing company.
Policy is concerned. But nonetheless, now the union have set up the press, the Vancouver Express, and they have capable personnel.
What's your point?
And I think Mr. Needham that he can expand that paper into a 40-page newspaper.
All right, let's ask him this question. Is it within the plan?
Would he have operating the, if they continue to operate the Express, would they have access to Associated Press and...
Very good question. Will you have access to a news service if the strike continues and you're bringing out the Express on a 3-weekly or even a daily basis?
Under our present arrangement, no, we don't have access to wire services. We would have to get into some other arrangement before we could do that.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the other day, Patty Sherman made the definitive statement that only 12 positions were involved to be taken out of the Guild.
That was later amended to 24, more or less.
All right, now I would like to know, this is my first question, how many does the Guild say? My second question is, on BCTV News, I heard a part of Jerry Marr's statement, the statement that he made that he expected a 6-month strike. We've heard that there were some other statements made by Jerry Marr to the effect that Pacific Press were ready to take the unions on at this time. My third question is at the end of today, will Jack Webster volunteer to bring both of these sides together?
The answer to the last question is no, he will not. It's none of his business. Now to the first question, which was, will it be a 6-month strike?
I think it was the second question, but that goes back to the midnight statement as the contract was expiring, and to the statement made by Jerry Marr, the chairman of the Management Negotiating Committee, who conducted all negotiations as a gentleman. He's no Santa Claus at the bargaining table, but we don't have any animosity there. He's a good bargainer. And he said, when he came back into the room after an hour-and-a-half adjournment, he said, "It's crunch time. This is the year we're going to take you on. We're financially prepared. We'll take you on for 1 month, for 2 months, for 3 months, for 4 months, for 5 months, for 6 months." I don't know what could have been clearer than that.
Did you hear that yourself?
Yes, and there were 3 newsmen on our side of the table taking notes. There was also an independent mediator involved.
What about how many exclusions do you fear from the Guild?
I believe that Mr. Sherman was referring to a letter dated October 6th, which was delivered to the Guild office, which notified us that they would be going to the Labor Relations Board to seek exclusion of certain classifications in Sun and Province editorial. This is a copy of the letter. This letter was never at any time placed on the table. It is not part of the company proposal. It's merely a notification that they were going. Now, Patty Sherman says 24. If you count the lines down there, you will see that there are 24 lines. However, look at some of those. Are those 24 positions?
I'll examine it during the break. For the benefit of Sun reporters and Pacific Press people who don't know the score, would you mind reading this to me? This is the model letter to the Newspaper Guild on the definition of what falls outside the, I'll read it, bargaining unit. Sports editor, U editor. Who's the U editor?
Ann Barling.
Business editor. Are they presently in the union?
Yes, they are.
Not the sports editor?
Yes, he is.
Presently in. The U editor?
Yes.
Business editor?
Yes.
Presently in. Provincial editor?
That's a vacancy.
Night City editor?
Yes.
Head photographer?
Yes.
That's still Charlie Warner?
That's right.
Good old Charlie. Been there 1,000 years. Features editor?
Yes.
Art and layout editor?
They're all Guild.
Assistants to the above position?
Wow.
How many assistants?
I don't know. It could, that's the company that's defining that. I suppose it could involve half the people in the newsroom if they want to expand
Assistant city editor, assistant news editor, slot man, rewrite chief?
Assistant city editors, I believe there's
Assistant
a line. Which could
city
include
editors.
Me.
That could be 2 or 3 or 4
It could
or
include
5.
me. I think any senior reporter at some time or another covers on the desk. I sometimes a night city editor.
Assistant news editors. The same again.
Yes.
Slot man, rewrite chief, head editorial dispatcher. What is a head editorial dispatcher?
In your day, and until just about a year ago, that was known as the head copy runner. By the way, the salary for that, weekly salary, is $246, whereas the senior reporter rate is $395 for comparison.
How old is it?
Pardon?
I hate to ask this question. How old would a head editorial dispatcher be? 20s?
Yes, I'd say she'd be in her 20s.
$246 for running copy? You've got a good agreement there for head editorial dispatchers.
They don't run copy anymore. They're very much involved with the VDT system.
I take back any sneer that was on my face. And the province is much the same. Assistants to the above, assistant city editors, assistant news editors. So you're fearful. You don't think 24 is really what they're aiming at. Telephone calls. Where shall I go, Linda? Go ahead, please. Where are you? Thank you very much. We'll try this one. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack?
Yes.
Yeah, gentlemen, I was just wondering, do you think there's a paranoia setting in the trade movement against the trade union movement? Are they getting scared, trying to run for cover or trying to get,
What do you think? Is it a paranoia in this whole Pacific Press business?
I think there's a very real fear, not a paranoia. If you've read the Atlantic Monthly article, The Big Squeeze on Labor Unions, which is mostly about the newspaper unions, and what is happening now with new technology coming in, and the position that the companies have been in the last few years, especially in Canada, helped by AIB, there's very much the fact that the companies are on the offensive, the unions are on the defensive.
You feel that, obviously.
Definitely, Jack, yes.
Yeah, that's been happening now for the last year and a half now in negotiations and every contract, and it seems in multinational companies. It seems like they're trying to take things away from what we have.
Well, we've generally examined these things on a local basis. I think you must concede. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to speak about the manning in the press room.
Go ahead.
And all I wanted to mention was the fact that this manning that we have in the press room at the present time was done by a time and motion study by Pacific Press. And at that particular time, our manning was reduced. And the manning we have right now is actually the manning that Pacific Press themselves, with the time and motion study men, have got in that press room. And something else I'd like to say is that this fella Davis, whoever he might be from back east, and this other fella Sherman, have not done any negotiating at all. All you're hearing is from two fellas that are standing on the sidelines, and if the company wants to negotiate, then send their boys on the TV and let the negotiators do the talking. Never mind this business of telling somebody what you want them to say like puppets. Get the guys, get Marr and those guys on TV, and let's get the answers.
Well, when Clark Davy, a distinguished newspaper man with a good record as a newspaper man, appears here to speak as publisher of the Sun, I ain't going to turn him down, and I presume that he knows the score on negotiations. Wouldn't you?
I would think he was well clued in before he
Anyway,
arrived
the
here.
point he's making is that the time and motion study was approved and offered and ordered by Pacific Press, and you agreed with that. How many years ago since it was revised?
Jack, that's a very good point. In 1966, the company brought in time and motion people to study the manning on our machines. Now, the result of that was that we ended up in arbitration because we did not agree. The arbiter upheld the time and motion experts' decision.
You
and in
accepted-
fact, we were reduced by 2 people at that particular time. To further expand on that, in 1972, we went to the bargaining table with a proposal on the manning, the union did, because there was one particular area in the manning clause on a 6-unit run, without getting too involved,
too technical,
that we needed an extra man, and the company agreed. In fact, they agreed to that, and we did, and we still do, have that one particular extra person on 6 units. Again, in 1974, we went to the bargaining table because we felt that we were justified in one particular area to do with the color work and preparation for that color work on the press, that we needed an extra man, and the company agreed.
What you're saying is that there has been reasonable negotiation in the past, but now you feel it's a master plan, war you called it, to smash the newspaper unions.
Jack, what they're saying is that they don't want our manning clause at all. They're saying, do away with it.
We'll guarantee you some kind of jobs, but we'll run the manning and not you.
Right, and there's...
Am I right, Phil?
They want everyone to be an employee of Pacific Press through the personnel department, the same as the Guild.
Phone calls to Needham and Dunster. Can't have a newspaper man on without a little bit of gossip. I felt kind of badly that Fotheringham was refused admission to the Socialist International Congress last night when he presented his Sun credentials. However, he got in with the other side of the coin, his Maclean's credentials. Eh? But, you know, the Sun's just back up to 250,000 circulation. Maybe you're going to cut the throat of this newspaper forever and left putting out your own non-union newspaper like in Toronto, where the telly people are putting out a non-union Toronto Sun.
It's one of the things that I feared, and that's what I told our membership meeting, which was held immediately that the picket lines went up, that the company is saying they're financially prepared to starve us out for 6 months, and what I fear is that those calculations were done by cost accountants and not by newspaper men, and I wonder if they have considered the future of the Sun in the province and whether or not that means that they're prepared to kill those 2 newspapers.
Well, just a minute. Prepared to kill these 2 newspapers?
Seriously reduce their circulation.
And let you have a free run at what might be a highly successful money-making operation?
Well,
Could it not
the Express could not support 1,417 people, which are now out on the streets. It's only because of Pacific Press's monopoly situation in this market that they're able to be so arrogant in this and to say that we can recover from a long shutdown because we're the only game in town. I don't know. Personally, I would welcome a competitor into this market. I think it would put us in a better situation.
When the Times died, it still had 40,000 faithful readers, didn't it?
Yes.
The Vancouver Times, remember that?
That's correct.
Mind you, if you make a settlement today or next month or the month after, you people, you'll immediately close down that operation.
I would expect that the company would probably make that a condition of settlement. You know, we do have clauses in our guild contract that we're not allowed to work for competitors.
Yes, I know. There's been trouble about that, hasn't there? Okay, a few quick calls on how you feel about the strike. No technical questions this time. Are you for them or are you against them? Are you on the side of Pacific Press or are you on the side of the union? Are you prepared to buy the Vancouver Express? 2 bits a copy?
That's right.
Go ahead, please.
I'm against the strike.
You're against the strike. Go ahead, please.
I'm against the strike.
Why?
Union.
Why are you against it?
Because Mr. Needham referred to efforts by management to publish a newspaper as scabbing, and I'd like to know why he is allowed to publish the Express.
He referred to what as scabbing?
Efforts by management to publish a newspaper during a strike. He is able to publish the Express.
In other words, you would, of course, be violently opposed to any scab newspaper produced inside picket lines.
Certainly.
But you'll bring out your own paper, which is technically non-union.
It's published by the Joint Council of Newspaper Unions.
So you have a broad blanket agreement, you might say. Well, are you for or against the strike?
Again.
Thank you. How about, where are you?
Right here.
Well, go ahead, please.
I'm against the strike.
Why?
I'm a private carrier. I've been one for about 18 months. I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and get out in the rain, the sleet, and the snow.
What are you?
Pardon?
What are you?
A carrier for the province. Carrier.
Oh, you're one of the mature carriers.
Yes. They get out at 3 o'clock in the morning. They have about 200 subscribers. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening to you, and you're very unhappy.
Yeah, and I get out and get chased by the dogs and everything, and they have job openings on the bulletin board in the Pacific Press, and I make an application and put in a good resume and everything, and they can't get the job because the manager wants to hire me, but they can't because the union says I'm not a regular employee. I'm not under collective bargaining.
In other words, he's a carrier man for the province, and he wants to apply for a job, but he doesn't have priority because he's not a full-time employee. Let me ask you a question. How much you make as a carrier?
Oh, probably about $200 a month.
That sounds as if his principal source of income depends on being a province carrier, and as such, I would think there's a good case for him being rolled a dependent contractor under the labor code, and probably and quite possibly within guild jurisdiction. I think we probably better organize those people.
You're saying, Phil Needham, that if they can be ruled dependent contractors, that you would aim at organizing carriers for the Sun and the province?
Yes.
Those of more
those that
mature ones?
Yes, I would think so.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Speak up.
Yes, Jack.
That's you.
Yes, I'm for the strike. As far as this goes about lifetime job guarantees, I was involved in a unit which has been phased out through automation. Now, Pacific Press, as far as they're concerned, I'm an employee of them, but I'm just a number on their payroll. Now, meaningful jobs, a lifetime guarantee is only as good as the length of the contract, which has been stipulated. Now, they like to go to the public and say, everybody down at Pacific Press, all 1,400 employees are guaranteed for life. Well, this is a bunch of garbage. And when you go through the personnel department and they try to place you into a place that you're going to fit, you got to go through, just as you're a person off the street, doesn't matter how long you've been with them, how long you've been in the craft trades. It just means that you're just starting at the bottom. The company has even gone as far as one of the members of our union has been placed in 2 or 3 different areas. And because he was a craft man, mid-management has replaced him and put him out of his job. One was in the advertising.
Give me no more details. Just the one point you make, which might be impressive, that the lifetime guarantee you get from Pacific Press is only as good as the contract.
Yes,
for the length of the contract.
That's right, same as any other clause in the contract.
A different way to look at it. Where are you speaking from? Eh? Victoria.
Hello, yes.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if these 2 labor negotiators feel that this never-ending conflict resulting in never-ending strikes is the best way to operate.
Well, that's a simple one. Phil, what do you say to that?
Well, I don't see any other way as long as we have the present system Covering business and society.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
Yes, I would say that I support the strike, and I would say that after having read the article in the Atlantic Monthly by A.H. Raskin that went into in considerable detail the amount of jobs that are being displaced through computer technology and automation in the newspaper business.
But is it the responsibility of the newspaper magnates, no matter how many millions they've taken out of it, to look after the future of employees, or is that the responsibility of the state?
Well, I think yes, but if you take that attitude, then I think you could look at any industry and say, well...
Yeah, okay, but I want that from Phil and Gary very briefly.
Well,
is it their job to look after?
What's happening now is the state is looking at it after it through unemployment insurance. That's why I think one of the major reasons why we have so much unemployment is through technology change.
Gary, any prospect of negotiations this week?
We have had no word at all. There's been no official approach on negotiations.
How about you?
I know of none. We're ready.
What can get you together?
I think some change on the part of management that they're intractable. They say they definitely want change. For example, on that guild exclusions, we thought we had an agreement on that, on old language, and then they said subject to decision by a third party.
My thanks to Phil Needham of the Guild and to Gary Dunster of the Printing Pressmen's Union.
Linda, could you say a few words?
Morning, Mike.
Morning, Mike.
I've got friends on both sides of the Pacific Press fence. Some will draw their pay throughout, some will be on $45 plus the profits of the Express. Don't like to see a newspaper strike. It hurts too many people, especially small business. Linda.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Have a happy week.
Thank you.
What about tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have an expose on the Vancouver drunk tank and an interview with Alan Blakeney.
Blakeney, the Prime Minister of Saskatchewan, and the drunk tank. You gotta see it. Unbelievable. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. precisely.